Miniature Steam Hacks, Hints and Tips Part 10. Quick and easy ways to make gaskets and studs. And now it's gasket time. I'm using my ink pad, and this time rather than putting the engine onto the ink pad, I'm putting the ink pad onto the engine, but unfortunately the ink pad is getting very dry. Can you believe it? I stored the ink pad on a shelf above the radiator. That's why it's dried up a bit, so I'll have to buy another one. But luckily there's still enough of an image to show me where the bolt holes need to be punched out and the shape of the gasket that I will be cutting out with a pair of scissors. Sometimes I'm just unlucky. I once bought a non-stick frying pan, but unfortunately it was so bad I couldn't peel the label off it. Anyway, that's enough of that. So what I'm doing at the moment is I'm using a scalpel to cut out the middle part of the gasket. And if you're using one of these scalpels, it's very important to wear eye protection. I say this every time. But if you don't, and the blade flies off and hits you in the eye, then you're going to resemble a pirate or Admiral Lord Nelson. And if anyone just for a laugh slides the eye patch onto the other eye, you'll think you've gone blind. I'm cleaning up the inside edge of the gasket, and I'm just using a piece of wet or dry sandpaper and rotating it just to get rid of any rough edges. And now I'm cutting out the gasket. I don't need the shape of the steam chest, so I'm cutting round that, but I'm purposely cutting it larger than I need. I don't want to undercut the gasket. Once the gasket is fitted and the steam chest cover is bolted to the cylinder, then all I need to do is run round the edge with a sharp knife, like this scalpel to the right of the picture, and it will trim the gasket automatically. When I try the gasket in position on top of the cylinder, it's a perfect fit. So on with the next job, fitting the cylinder cover. I'm going to show a specific way of fitting the cylinder cover that some experts may not like, but I don't care. This stuff's called bond lock, and it's 603 bond lock, which is an alternative, and it's almost identical to Loctite 603. I just happened to be at a place where I bought some bearings, and I thought I'd try it. It tasted the same as Loctite 603, but it wasn't quite as sweet as Loctite 542. So what I've done is I've chopped down some bolts, and I'm using the threaded part and some bond lock to lock the threaded part to a nut. So really I'm making some custom bolts that look like studs when they're in position. And I'm really sorry about this, I couldn't help myself. But now look at the effect. Every one of these studs is a carbon copy of the one next door to it. And they look quite good. And who's to know? Apart from you and I. And the good thing is they're hardly likely to ever shear off in the casting, because when you remove them, they come out quite easily. One of the studs didn't go into the hole to the correct depth, so what I did was I used a drill to check the depth of the hole, and then I realised that it just needed threading all the way to the bottom. It had only been threaded halfway down. So I used a 4BA tap to thread it, and now this stud screws into place just as well as the others did. At the moment I'm having a final check to make sure that the studs are tightened evenly. In this clip I'm running around the edge with the scalpel to remove any surplus gasket material, and as usual every time I work with this scalpel I wear eye protection. There are two more gaskets to make, one for the steam chest and one for the steam chest cover, but I'm using the steam chest cover to make the template. And once again, because I was stupid enough to put the ink pad above the radiator in the workshop, I'm not getting a very good image, but it's just good enough for me to see. The first thing to do is to punch out all the holes. But now I'm having to put a lot of pressure on the punch, and that's because the punch is full. The punch tube is completely full of previous cuttings from gaskets. So I'm just using a small bolt to push them out. And here they are, falling all over the bench. Time to make some gaskets. I'm going to use some brown paper for the gaskets. And the best way to make the gaskets is to punch out the centre part first. This is one of a set of hole punchers I bought a while back via eBay, and I must say that they really are terrible. They don't even punch the holes, so they're a complete waste of time. And quite apart from being rubbish, they're too small anyway for the job that I need them to do. So I think it's a good idea to show how to make your own hole punchers. I need to punch a really nice clean hole which is 9/16 of an inch in diameter. And because I'm making two of these engines, I need to punch a total of 4 holes. So I'm going to make a quick, cheap and cheerful hole punch. I fitted a piece of steel bar that I found in my scrap box, which was part turned anyway, into the 3-jaw chuck in my Boxford lathe. It's very simple to make, and the end of the bar's already been drilled. I'm using a boring tool from the inside to outside at an angle. This will give a very fine razor sharp edge. The very last turning operation with the boring tool just lifted the edge outwards a bit. Here I'm just cleaning it up with a normal lathe tool, and it's very sharp indeed. That's it. All that remains to be done is to part it off, but I'm not going to let it fall into the chip tray, as that may damage the edge. Here's the finished tool in action. It's really good. It cuts very nice clean 9/16 of an inch diameter holes in this piece of brown paper. By the way, this is one of those envelopes that you buy that hold photographs that says "do not bend" on the front. And it's absolutely ideal for this job because the cutter goes through into the cardboard and doesn't blunt. In this clip, using a scalpel, which is extremely sharp, health and safety warnings, etc., be very careful when doing this, I'm roughly cutting the external part of the gasket to shape. The next part of the job is to hold the cylinder cover on top of the cylinder, making sure that the holes in the cylinder cover are aligned with the holes in the cylinder. And while holding the cover in position tightly, I just poke through the holes with a scriber. Thanks for watching, and I hope you found it useful.